Welcome to the latest Superversive livestream where we're talking about first contact and four last things. We're going to discuss the idea of meeting aliens and what this will mean for, well, I would say religions, but probably worldviews in general. And today we have author Ben Zawicki, Zawitsky, I'll get it right eventually.
Zawicki, yes.
David Halquist, another author, sci-fi journal published. Josh Young, another author with a forthcoming book. And John C. Wright, who, well, he's another author, but he's way out of our league. So
we all stand in his shadow.
That's because I'm vastly overweight, and you can fit an elephant in my But mention that I had 6 nominations for Hugo Awards last year.
There you go.
Yeah. And they were all quite good,
Thank
despite
you.
how the voting went out.
Quite good. Ah, heretic.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Only quite good. Blasphemer.
Well, my introduction to John was the Golden Age trilogy, and he's had a hard time topping that one for me. So I still pre-order everything, but
oh, there you go. All right.
Well, that's usually true. Usually, an author's first book is his best, and usually an actor or an actress does better in the interview than they do on the job. Audition, excuse me. The word's audition. Better than the audition than the job.
Ah, there we go.
Fair enough.
Golden Age is getting hard to find.
Yeah, I
Anyway.
was just thinking about that, but okay. Sorry. Go, Jason.
Let's get vaguely.
Yeah, but I never got around to writing the sequel, Silver Age, Bronze Age, Iron Age. Kali Yuga.
One
Do
day.
not
Anyway,
tempt us like that.
anyway, before we lose our viewers, let's get on topic. Let's actually start. So, first contact, aliens, and religion. This has always been one of those. Well, I don't know. I've been sort of talking to atheists online and things for as long as I've been a Christian, which is what 20 odd years now. And wow, 22. Anyway, there always seems to be the assumption that meeting aliens will disprove once and for all the idea that religion has any meaning. I'm not sure. It seems to be a variant on the idea that the universe is really, 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 really big, like God cares about us. It's a kind of silly argument because Ptolemy knew the universe was really, 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 really big, and the Earth was but a point in it. So it's not a new idea, but there seems to be a new spin on this. Anyway,
But in all fairness, their argument is stronger than just saying that the universe is big, and that the aliens landing will prove the universe is big. If an alien lands, it calls into question the basic, fundamental, at least Christian worldview, because the aliens are not the children of Adam, and so if they're fallen, they can't have fallen with the fall of man, and if they're naturally evolved creatures, then they can't be unfallen. I mean, they can't be without sin. You see where I'm going with this? I think their argument is slightly stronger than that. I think that I think that meeting aliens would be the same as if you met someone from the Antipodes in the Middle Ages. By the Antipodes, I mean the undiscovered continent on the far side of the planet that no one had ever visited, which St. Augustine speculated about. And he said that if there were men there, they had to be children of Adam. They had to be share human nature and have the flaws of natural man. So the argument is as old as the Middle Ages, by the way.
No, that's fine. I agree. I mean, it's just, it seems an odd assumption that automatically this would prove religion is false. So
yeah, well, I think it's an unreflected assumption. They just go, your book says God created human beings and human beings are important, and now there are these other things, and they think they're important. How do human beings fit in, or how does everyone fit into this scheme if your God created the earth and everything with it? And so I think there's it's almost a geocentrism sort of worldview, like humanity has to be the center of the world, whereas, there might be a more proper interpretation for sons of Adam than just human beings.
Okay, I'll give you that. Well, I was going to say. Oh, sorry. I was going to say back in the day, I used to be a fan of the UFO contact magazines and stuff, and one of the interesting things, actually, Hugh Ross from Reasons to Believe published a book called Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men. And the observation about UFO encounters was, the interesting thing is, UFOs always turn up and want to teach you New Age philosophy. Or New Age religion. This is very strange. This is very strange behavior for aliens, that they turn up from across the universe and buzz people in the back of nowhere and teach them New Age religion.
Well,
Very odd behavior.
Kind of amusing that it's always that, but the concept of space missionaries is believable. It's one of the reasons why so many human beings went out to completely alone, empty, very primitive, horrible conditions, and they would do it not for commercial reasons, but for that. So I can actually believe something like that happening, not thinking it's going to just happen to be what, they're just going to do the New Age or whatever anyone thinks is their favorite. But the concept of someone doing what they would literally consider to be the most important thing in the universe, crossing the vast gulf of the stars, where there's no immediate economic, political, or military objective that such vast distances would normally be crossed for, seems not impossible.
May I blow my horn for just a moment?
Mm-hmm.
At a science fiction convention, a guy once asked the general question to the panel. This is one of those John W. Campbell Jr. questions that's supposed to spark your imagination and get you wondering about how to write a good story. And he said, what could possibly motivate someone to go to another star if you don't have fast light drive and it's going to take you decades or centuries to get there and decades or centuries to get back? What possible good could be worth going? And so the first story I ever sold was an answer to that question, because I had two answers. One was that the planet had the secret of immortality on it, which means that once you get there, even if you get there as an old man, you can come back with eternal youth. And the other one was that they were missionaries. They were Jesuits, because even back when I was an atheist, I knew and acknowledged that the Jesuits had done amazing work in science, and were probably, and living in a tin can for 40 years is not any better or worse than living on top of a pillar like St. Simon Stylites in the Egyptian desert. But I mean, religious people have done such things for the greater glory of God before. So I'm agreeing with your answer. That's a perfectly cromulent answer for why the aliens would come. Why they preach Southern California New Ageism? Well, I prefer the UFOs or devils theory myself. If we all preach,
yes,
preach
I thought that was roughly where Hugh Ross ended up. It's very interesting that aliens. Well, it seems unlikely aliens could get here, and then when they do, they turn up, and they're Southern California New Ages. I haven't sort of followed the literature for years, so I don't know if that's still the case. But this was the case back in the '90s, so that was sort of the stories that turn up.
I love UFO sightings because, as a science fiction writer, we made it up, and then people just started seeing them after we made them up from our own head. So I think it shows the true gullibility of the human character.
I remember when I was very young, I used to be kind of weirded out and a little scared of UFO abductions. And finally my father popped in the VHS of Star Wars and fast-forwarded to the cantina scene. And he's like, you see these? They look awfully familiar, don't they? I'm like, yeah, that's everything that's supposedly abducting people is in that cantina.
Yeah.
Came here to play music.
Now, I myself think the little gray aliens with the big eyes are actually all the ghosts of the aborted fetuses who have come back to haunt us and ask their mothers why they killed them.
That's a creepy thought.
Well, that would be a great premise for a horror novel.
Any of you gentlemen can use it.
Wow.
I can't write, but I'll publish it.
Now, the other possibility is that the UFO would land on the ball field in front of the White House, like they do in Day of the Earth Stood Still, and Klaatu would come out, and before he gets shot, he would say, "I'd like to speak to whoever's in charge. Our instruments picked up a tremendous psychic explosion here about 2,000 years ago, as if a deity arrived and we're sure you treated him really well. Could you please tell us what when he got here?" And then they shoot him.
One of the terrible theories floating around about the movie Prometheus is that Jesus was one of the engineers, and they're all pissed off at us for having killed him.
Well, he came back. I mean, he re-engineered himself, just like the Pyramid of Ra in Stargate. Now, I of course would like to see the aliens land and say, how come you guys haven't you had your local version of St. Thomas Aquinas who can deduce the existence of God with very simple logic? What kind of primitive barbarians are you? Where's your pope? Where's your bishops? Don't you have baptism? You know, and say that we will admit you into the galactic ecumenical confederation of the Spirit, provided you show us your confirmation records and you can recite the Ten Commandments. And so I think I would throw the atheists back a little bit on their heels.
That could be an awkward conversation with Obama on the White House lawn.
Yeah.
God help us if we
Oh
get a
no!
bunch
What
of
Obama would do is he would just rush away and seize all our guns to prevent that from happening. The aliens have landed, and
Goodness me.
They're here because of climate change.
Reasonable gun control. The climate change is affecting the whole universe.
You joke, but they remade the day the Earth stood still with Keanu Reeves, and that was what it was about.
I object to blasphemy against my gods, and I object to blasphemy against my favorite movies. So yeah, I did not see that. I started stopping to watch science fiction movies with that movie. Okay, as of that movie, I said, from now on, science fiction movie actually has to be good for me to watch it. The old days of watching anything with SF on are over for me. Because that's one of my favorite movies.
So it has to be at least Starship Troopers good?
Well,
I thought, I'm sorry, I fainted for a moment. Where am I? What were we talking about? You should mention, by the way,
what was that?
The four last things in First Contact. I'm not sure everyone knows what the four last things are.
Yes, please.
It's a Christian notion of heaven, hell, judgment, and you have to clean up your room, I think, are the four last things.
Resurrection.
Resurrection.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Death, resurrection, heaven, hell. Yeah. So, collectively known as eschatology.
There you go. Whoa!
It's tens of thousands of dollars a year going there.
Check out
Someone should write a book about the eschaton.
I hear it's good.
It's all good. See, I'm trying to get back vaguely on topic. One of the things I've always thought was strange when talking to atheists, and I've asked this question of them, I never get an answer, is so what would you do when the aliens land on the White House lawn? They come down, and well, like what John was saying, or they come down telling of a triune creator God who incarnated to save them all, and it's like you never get an answer from them. But I mean, surely this is at least as likely as anything they want to put forward. There's no reason to think this couldn't be the case. Or they could be traveling space jihadis. There's an unpleasant thought.
The reason why they think it's not the case is because our religion is based on historical facts that happened here on Earth. Unless you want to say that Christ appeared on other planets and died on other planets for their sins as well, which I suppose is a possibility. I think the atheists actually have a fairly strong argument. They say you Christians say the reason why man is sinful is because he's fallen. The reason why he's fallen is because of Adam, a particular man who did a particular thing, who disobeyed God. Now you can take that metaphorically and say any creature that disobeys God enters into a fallen state, which is fine. But then you have to say, well, how does Christ's death and resurrection here on Earth affect the people on Mars? The Christian, I assume, can say back, well, how does it affect people in India? The Christian can say back, it's the same argument that we've had since the beginning of the religion about what it's the missionary argument. How does what happened here in Palestine in the first century affect all mankind? Or for that matter, how did this fall of Adam affect all mankind? You see where the argument is? I don't think the argument is just that Christians are stupid if the universe is big, or that they. I think their argument is that what happens on the other planets is simply disconnected from the historical events on Earth. And unlike other religions, Christianity is tied into history.
Yeah, and I think there is a definite mindset issue, even within the faith. If aliens land on the White House lawn, and even if they come out and saying, we've got this triune God, and he has, this set of very Christian beliefs that he says we need to follow, I think there's a lot of people that will look at that. How do we deal with Adam and the garden and sin and all this jazz? Now in the light of there's more to the world or to the universe than just Earth.
But we've always known that is the problem. I mean, the findings of geology that the Earth is older than 6,000 years, or the findings of Darwin, or at least his supposition that humans evolved from an ape-like ancestor, already cast doubts on the literal interpretation of the Bible. I'll just point out that Augustine and other church fathers don't necessarily interpret that Bible literally.
No, I know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's Irenaeus it might have been Irenaeus that was floating around an idea of the fall that turned out that was sort of vastly different from how Augustine looked at it, and sort of saw humanity as being created imperfect so that we could go through the process of apotheosis. Or divinization, I believe, is a better term for it.
Aren't those terms interchangeable?
Well, I think at least this is mostly Orthodox theology, so forgive me if I'm screwing it up, but apotheosis, I think, is ascendancy to godhood, whereas divinization is more becoming like God than becoming a god.
Mm.
I was under the impression that essentially when the Eastern Orthodox speak of apotheosis, it's becoming like God. It's this.
Right.
It's not. Yeah. It's not. It's not becoming. I guess it's in. Let me back up and reformulate that.
Well,
it's like becoming a little God, I suppose, but not in the.
But all Christians think we take on Christ's divine nature when we take him into ourselves. So
yeah, absolutely.
I see the technical distinction, but I don't think it'll play out as being a big deal in the end.
I'm a theology student. I have to make my distinctions, otherwise they dock me points.
Oh no, rightly so. Rightly so. Without those distinctions, the church would fail.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where was it going there?
If the aliens land and they want to know how to become God, what do we tell them? I, of course, would say, eat the blood and drink the wine and eat the bread, and get baptized.
Yeah, and that's absolutely valid. I think we need, at least in terms of Christianity, we need a conception of the death that Paul talks about as something bigger than just like kicking the bucket and getting buried.
Well, here's the thing the atheists are imagining. The aliens land in the flying saucer and they walk out and they say, "We don't have aging or death on our planet. We don't have any crime. What's wrong with you guys? Why are you this way?" And they say, "We evolved from space apes into spacemen." And so there's no. I mean, if the aliens walk out and say that, what can the Christians say? Here's creatures that don't seem to suffer from the sin of Adam. They don't seem to be mortal.
They may not be fallen.
They may not be fallen if they're not fallen.
My answer to that would be they're still trapped in an entropic universe. And personally, I tend to associate death with entropy. We are dying because our cells are undergoing entropy. The universe is dying because it's undergoing entropy. And at least
are you the guy who said you liked my golden age? Because that was, of course, the same answer I gave in that book. Because I actually proposed the computers that were immortal and without sin, and yet, even so, they were still trapped within an entropic universe. They had not escaped from death.
Has everyone read C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy?
Yes.
Yes.
I have.
It's my regret.
I've both read it and read it to my kids.
Really?
Well, 2 of the books. I haven't gotten around to That His Strength yet.
That has one of the creepiest scenes in any book I've ever read. So maybe I'll read that to the kids.
I have to say, it is much better as science fiction than I remembered it as being. I'm amazed that the science fiction community does not praise that book to the sky, because he takes some of H.G. Wells' tropes and gives them more depth and more character. His personality his ability to draw characters is better than Wells. and certainly better than Olaf Stapledon and his other contemporaries. And he wrote those. These were pre-Heinlein, if I recall correctly, when they were written.
Mm-hmm.
They were written during the war, right? During World War II.
Yep.
I think so.
But it just surprises me that at how well he had done just the science fiction-y part of it. There was one scientific gaffe that he made in his first book, which is a howler. But aside from that, he has his spacemen in zero G wearing heavy belts to draw them to the center of their craft for gravity. When I read it when I was young, I assumed that the engine in the middle of the craft was producing an artificial gravity field. But when I reread it, I realized that was just my youthful imagination filling in the blanks, and he hadn't said that at all. He just thought the weight of the craft would pull your feet to the middle, and I was like, okay, no, Mr. Lewis, that's not the way it works.
It wasn't the size of a small moon.
That's all right, though. I mean, but
that's a minor gaffe. But aside from that one, everything else was spot on. So
yeah, I got the publication dates here: 1938, 1943, 1945.
There you go.
Yeah.
I think the issue there is that the non-Christian portion of the science fiction community has a pretty deep disdain for C.S. Lewis. So,
well, you'd think they'd at least still recognize his. I mean, I can recognize the craftsmanship of H.G. Wells, even though the guy's a flippin' socialist.
but see, you're sane, and so you're capable of appreciating things on their merits, even if you don't agree with the point of view. Whereas ideology is everything to the other side.
My wife will get back to you about that sanity thing. We're still on that. Oh no, wait, excuse me. That proves it, doesn't it? Because crazy people think they're sane, and sane people know they're crazy.
There you go. I would ask, was the Space Trilogy, was it more popular in the past?
I have no idea.
I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not old enough, so.
My introduction to it was a set of paperbacks from my mother that were from like the 60s that were falling apart. So I don't know if that was popular or not.
I can tell you this: when Bob Heinlein in his Future History series predicted the crazy years, that was one of his best predictions because they happened and we're living in them. But when C.S. Lewis in that Hidden Strength predicts the post-war, all-consuming, scientifically run state built on outrageous lies, he was as accurate as George Orwell. I mean, he was remarkably accurate in his prediction. I'm amazed at his insight.
I would point out, you know how in That Hideous Strength, for those that have read it, the evil government organization is called NICE?
Yes.
There is actually a department, I think it's of the NHS in the UK, called NICE. Clearly they haven't read the book.
I had the NICE as one of the bad guys in a role-playing game I was running, which was and so when they started moving into Edgetheow, I had one of the old grannies go, "The nice people tore down my house." And that's a running joke. That's been a running joke in my household, which is I owe it to C.S. Lewis, but it's not actually in his book.
There you go.
So, I think a couple of possibilities we could be looking at in the standard, breaking it out into some different common tropes that we assume aliens would have is we have, of course, the atheistic aliens believe the universe is a natural phenomenon, but they're not necessarily perfect. They're, aliens. I'm not assuming perfect beings here. You've got ones that potentially believe in a divine supreme being, but there might be major differences. Or you might have ones that, they envision the creators having tentacles like they do, or something like that. So those would be, well, the Trinitarian aliens would be amazing as well. Yeah, but how would you imagine the reaction here be with such things? Because it isn't necessarily proof either way of what they believe in, but it would be intriguing to see how people would react to that sort of thing.
Science fiction stories are slightly different from realistic speculation because, of course, we science fiction guys are trying to make up something that's dramatic. When you're making up an alien religion that's dramatic, usually you want it to have it be a snake god to which a virgin is being sacrificed. So you can have your hero to have a snake god to fight and have a virgin to save. But most of our science fiction tropes come from the Age of Discovery, when the white man came in his tall ships and landed on the shores where the Aborigines were, and their religions did not survive, because our religion was more sophisticated, was more true to human nature. My atheist friends would disagree as to whether that's the reason or not, but they're expecting the same thing to happen, I assume, when the aliens land and ask us to worship the absolute, the one universal being of which they themselves worship. So either the aliens are going to be, I think the reaction would be about the same as we had when the whites went to India and they found both Malabar Christians who had been there since the Roman days, and found a highly sophisticated pagan worldview with a fairly complex theology, but pessimistic. I think the aliens, by the nature of reality itself, any alien who had a religion that was not a Christian religion would be fatalist and would not believe in free will, because no one else seems to believe in free will except for those guys. Even Islam, which is a heresy of Christianity, are fatalists. Don't believe in free will. Everything is written. Mm-hmm. So when the aliens come down and they say everything is written, I'm not sure it would be that different from us meeting the Chinese, highly advanced culture,
or Calvinists,
who are kind of a throwback. Sorry, Calvinists, that was a joke.
I have some very good Calvinist friends.
But if society is
my Calvinist friends, I had no choice but to say that, my Calvinist friends.
Yeah, the earliest I can think of where there's lots of free will breakout stuff was during a brief period, and really was kind of a minority opinion in Greece, and we have it because they saved the records, but most people believe things were divinely foreordained for the most part. So yeah, I'm trying to think of a good challenge for that, but I can't find it.
Look at the Oedipus myth, and compare it to the story of Jonah going to Nineveh. When Jonah goes to Nineveh and he says, "You guys are going to be blasted in 40 days," they all repent and they're not blasted. When Oedipus is told, "You're going to kill your parents," his attempt to avoid killing his parents is what makes him kill his parents.
Right, and you could have, and just because they would have incredibly capable technology, they could still view a deterministic and mechanistic environment.
In fact, aren't most non-Christians, aren't most of your atheist friends determinists? Don't most of them think that the universe is a machine made of molecules and atoms and energies that move according to a thoughtless program, and that your thoughts yourself are part of that program?
Right. It's why there's the general belief that education will potentially cure everything, or that there's a force of history and all this kind of stuff that comes from that kind of. It's a logical conclusion of determinism.
Yeah. Now, I always tell my determinist friends that I am programmed not to believe in determinism, so there's no point in arguing the point. And they never either believe me or get the joke.
I've said that too. I've said that too. Oh, you're a determinist. There's no point trying to reason with you because, and it's just like they go.
Because your gene.
They get really insulted when you just go, well, no, you believe what you believe because of the chemicals in your brain, and
I just tell them that I don't have the determinism gene, so I don't believe the genes determine your personality characteristics. I can't change my genetics,
It's
I also
totally
tell them I'm a Libra, and that no Libras. I also tell them I'm a Libra, and no Libras believe in astrology, because I like saying the same joke over and over again.
I like that joke. That's a good joke.
It's okay. I like writing the same book over and over again. By the way, I'm trying to top Golden Age with my Count to a Trillion books, because that Count to a Trillion is the opposite of the Golden Age. It's the same argument from the other side. I'm giving the prosecution argument rather than the defense argument.
You're definitely going in the right direction there, but so far there's no Atkins.
Well, there you have me. I'm not going to argue that point. I can't top Atkins. He was based on a friend of mine, a soldier.
Well, this is amazing. There's a whole two-no-hole series I now have to read. Thanks, guys.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh no, thank you. I'm high-fiving Josh, behind your back, or whoever it was who gave. I'm sorry. Which one of you guys is the guy who read my book?
That's me.
Okay,
I've
you.
read
Yay.
I'm reading your Count to a Trillion. I haven't been able to find good copies of your Golden Age stuff. I mean, I could get them in electronic, but it seems heresy to have such a thing in an impermanent format.
But you know what's good about that? You can tap a word to look it up, and John is about the only person I ever have to do that with anymore. So
you should read more Jack Vance then, or more Gene Wolfe.
Gene Wolfe is one of the few people that takes up more bookshelf space than you do. So
he's worth it. He's worth it. I wish I could understand his books. I wish he would answer a few questions about them, because he's smarter than me. I can't figure him out. But I like it. What I can figure out, I really like. Now, you notice what he drawing it back on topic. You notice what he did in his. I don't know if you gentlemen have read the Shadow of the Torturer books, but what he did is he simply established the aliens, the Hierodules, as being something akin to servants of a divine force that is the same thing that the religion of the people of the Commonwealth worship. If that makes sense. They regard the space aliens as divine beings, as angelic messengers, or perhaps as diabolical. But in their universe, the science fiction is not divorced from their theology. If that makes sense what I'm saying. They simply regard the people who dwell in the sky as being like the sky gods, which is a fairly common trope in science fiction. So common, in fact, that R2-D2 has to be programmed not to do it. The robot is programmed not to behave as a deity, not to impersonate a divinity. Which is funny, because if you guys ever saw this show Stargate that was on 10 years ago, 20 years ago? I forget how long ago.
Stargate. Yep.
Every time they came to the Stargate, the natives would bow and worship, because, of course, they were using the gateways that the Goa'uld had used, that the bad guys had used, who always pretended to be divine.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I love me some Stargate.
Every planet looks like Canada.
What's funny about Stargate is you never could have fooled the Jews or the Christians or the Muslims, because no matter what you said you were, they would go, well, you're not invisible and infinite, and you didn't create the universe. The pagan gods don't even pretend to have created the universe, do they? Zeus is not the oldest beings, nor is Odin. In fact, Odin is as trapped as Oedipus is in fate.
Yes.
If you think about it, if you watch Wagner's opera. So again,
they're all limited beings, yeah.
There was actually an episode where they get to a planet and there's a Goa'uld impersonating Satan, and someone asks about impersonating the Christian God. It's like there's no Goa'uld who could pull that off. So.
Yes. Oh yeah, I remember that. No, he and Teal'c asks Jack about it one day. Have you not read it? He just sort of poo-poos it and doesn't want to talk about it, but
Yep.
Anyway.
So I just want
to
say, when the atheists hoping for this alien culture to come down, that's atheistic, obviously, and inherently deterministic, then there's not really going to be any reason for those people to come to Earth unless they have a nefarious motive, unless they have
like
something that they
harvesting all our water.
or genetic material, or so it's not really a very well thought out hope, is it?
No, it reminds me of the conversation I had with some transhumanists after I wrote the book The Golden Age, where some of the transhumanists I spoke with believed that AIs would replace us the same way we've replaced the apes, that they're the next step in evolution, the artificial intelligences. But that we should not either train them or teach them morality or teach them to be grateful to their creators, but should instead let them destroy us. And at that point, I thought that maybe my atheist friends were a little suicidal in their daydreaming, if you know what I mean. If the aliens land and there's no God and they're just stronger than us, then won't we just be put on the reservations like the Red Indians?
Well, I've heard the idea of the singularity, when everyone gets replaced by supercomputers and all this. I've heard it referred to as the nerd rapture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nerd rapture. That's not a bad term for it.
Where it all get downloaded into AIs and then just watch porn forever. That sounds like
That's an
hell to
entertaining
me,
thought.
gentlemen.
Yeah.
But again, even in the most optimistic versions of the nerd rapture, you're still trapped in an entropic universe.
Yeah.
You still need to be redeemed from death eventually.
There is a Muslim folktale about a man who's granted by God that he will live the life of 7 men, and in addition will live as long as 7 generations of, I think, hawks or falcons or something. And on the last day when the last falcon dies, he'll die. And so as he's watching his final bird molting and about to fall over, he's screaming for more life, and he dies nonetheless. So that even though the guy had lived as long as Methuselah, I mean, I'm sorry, Methuselah's gone. You're right about the entropy. Death is not just a human biological condition. It's a condition of reality that only a reality-wide being or technology could either affect or unaffect. I'm saying this rather badly. Let me try again. If the nerds really wanted to have a real heaven on earth, they'd have to change the second law of thermodynamics to get there.
Good luck with that.
Yes.
Now, some of the nerds believe this. Some of the transhumanists think that we will eventually learn how to rewrite the laws of nature.
Asymptote.
I just think that Dr. Faustus thought the same thing, and it was a fib. You know.
I don't remember that ending badly.
What? Mephistopheles lived happily ever after. That's a happy ending for him. I'm sorry, my son and I have a running joke in our house. Whenever we talk about happy endings, we always say, "Well, Hamlet ended happily for Fortinbras." Who is the guy, if you remember the play, who ends up in charge of Denmark after the entire royal family is killed in one afternoon. So yeah, when the aliens land, it'll be a happy ending for Klaatu.
So yeah, the whole the idea of being uploaded, it doesn't sound very well. I guess I don't know. I guess the appeal is somewhat lost on me. Maybe it wasn't when I was an atheist.
It wasn't lost on me when I was an atheist. I would have done it in a minute, because then I could live 1,000 years, 10,000 years, till he did the universe. And the other option was oblivion, was non-existence, which is infinitely evil from the atheist point of view. So I would have done it in a moment. Nowadays, no, not at all. Wouldn't not even tempted.
Oh, who's read Dan Simmons' Hyperion series?
I have.
I've read the first one.
It's brilliant. Brilliant. I liked it better than his Ilion series, by the way. I thought he fell on his face on that second one, but Hyperion, very good. In the sequels, the evil Roman Catholic Church has really kick-ass Swiss guard who are like these cyborg, kill monsters that die and come back to life on command.
I love that.
His whole point, if I understand his point, he's also a smart man, so I might not understand his point, is that when you had artificial resurrection and artificial eternal youth, which the evil Church of Evil could provide their followers in that background, thanks to the cruciform, a symbiotic alien life form, it robbed the Church of all of its spirit, which then had to be sought somewhere else, and that's what Aeneas was for. She was the prophet of the future people.
Right, but it wasn't just that it lost that, though. That's a brilliant analysis. I hadn't thought of it. It was also turned out that every time they did that, and every time someone went through one of their gates where they were broken down and reassembled, like a transporter, every time that happened, they died and their soul left. So
it was
like harvesting basically the deaths of people as they were going through that. They didn't remember it because
in the end of the final book, there's the admission that there's things living in whatever it is they're using for the farcasting, and every time they do it, it like wipes out the intelligences that have gone on. So there's another wrinkle in our nerd rapture uploading.
Yeah.
Right.
Has anyone read?
Not to
can you imagine trusting your brain to Microsoft? They just pushed through another update to my computer, and that was one reason why I had so much trouble getting online with you gentlemen today. And have them be in charge of my memories. Well, in my case, that wouldn't be a big drawback. It would be about the same. But for you guys, it would be terrible. Suddenly, not being able to remember your name or where you are.
But yeah,
has anyone read Has anyone read The Reality Dysfunction by Peter F. Hamilton?
Oh,
The series?
yes. Mm-hmm.
I haven't read it. It's on my list of books to read. I haven't
It's
read
excellent.
I really enjoyed it. But it has a really interesting idea in it where sorry, I'm going to have to spoil this a little bit for you, John. It's not too big a spoiler. But they have this idea of...
You can log off for a second.
They have this idea of... they discover when people die, by people coming back, that they go to some sort of afterlife, which is it seems rather hellish for the people that are there.
Yeah.
But there's also this other race of... this other branch of humanity that uploads themselves, who have all become atheists essentially and think upload is the only way to live forever, effectively, what we're talking about. And there's this evil corporate dude in the background that's originally developed the technology, well, was originally a big fan of the technology because he's been using it to clone himself, downloading himself into a new body periodically.
Mm-hmm.
And then they discover, when you die, your soul, engram, whatever you want to call it, sticks around in this different reality. It's sort of an interesting take on it because you've got a soul, but you've got a soul, but you don't actually. There's not a god as such in the universe, and it's this sort of emergent. The soul is this emergent property. Anyway, what I thought was interesting is I've always thought there might be a short story in the idea of a society with teleporting technology where the teleporter effectively kills you and reconstructs you.
There is, in fact, a short story. You published it. It's Whispers.
No, different idea. Related. And so every time you get teleported, the person dies. The person at the other end doesn't realize they've died. They're a new person because of the way the soul emerges with the form. And the story could be told from the perspective of all of these people that have been teleported, or all of these different copies of the one guy who's been teleported lots of times, sitting there going, we've really got to stop doing this somehow, because there's all of us here and we're all dead and he doesn't know it and he keeps doing it.
Right.
Only Dr. Bones McCoy would be safe. In my 9 Princes of Amber meets Tolkien role-playing game, I had a necromancer visiting the Star Trek universe. It was one of the shadows, one of the alternate timelines of the that they could visit. And he alone, because he could see into the spirit world, could see the ghosts of the dead hovering around the transporter mechanism. Hundreds of people, but not Dr. McCoy, who always used the shuttle, because of course all the dead were there. So I had used the idea in a game, but not in a story. So it's a fair game for anyone.
No, I just thought it was an interesting idea. It's just like
It's a great idea.
Unexpected. I can't write, so you know.
I didn't have the physical ghosts, but yeah, in Whispers in I think it's Sci-Fi Journal 6.
Oh yes, that was a creepy.
You've got the cybernated created realm where all of the downloads were, because of course every time they were sending them, they sent a new copy. So that was basically the restore file was filled with people that had been transported, and of course they couldn't tell people not to use the transporter.
I know. Does anyone read Robert J. Sawyer?
I have not as of yet.
Oh, I like his stuff.
I read one of his books.
He does sci-fi quite well, but he had a detective story called Red Planet Blues, and this is one of the things I've always found strange about this uploading concept of trying to live forever that way. It's quite explicit that you're making a copy, and when they upload people, they throw the old body away because it's not needed anymore. They basically euthanize you. But you can't tell because it's a continuous stream of consciousness. They like put you to sleep, copy you, and then you wake up again. But yeah,
someone else wakes up again.
It's really creepy and horrible. But and then there was part of the story where someone's made an illegal copy of someone to torture, so they can get information out of it while the real person is totally oblivious to what's going on.
I recommend reading Jack Vance's To Live Forever, which also I think has come out in an edition called Clarges, where basically at the end of the story, not to spoil the story for you, but he wakes up the copies in waiting, the idea there is that you would make clones beforehand and download your brain information into them. If your body died, they would wake up with all your knowledge. Now, when I was young, I was convinced that your brain information was your personality. I had read World of Null, where that's one of the main plot points. The main character dies in Chapter 7 and wakes up in Chapter 8. Of course, he himself in the book realizes that he is another copy of himself and is not actually the same person, though he thinks all the same things and has all the same values and attitudes. The same thing shows up in the Golden Age that I wrote and in Counter a Trillion, where they know it's a copy. If you treat it like it's a child, then that's different from thinking it's yourself. If you're doing it to escape from mortality, you're not going to make it. If you think of it as your diary that's going to take on a life of its own and be a kid of yours, that can make it. You can be immortal through your children, but then again, you could do that nowadays with that technology.
Right. I was reading the amazing Pandora's Star, which I love, but their immortality is just that. They download themselves into copies of themselves, and I thought, wait a minute, and that was basically led to Quantum Process in Sci-Fi 2, for Sci-Fi Journal 2, which was like, what happens to the whatever you're downloading from? Maybe, so yeah.
Well, nothing. He's
kills himself 3 times, basically.
And it gets very, very awkward for him when he gets left behind.
For once, you can make suicide illegal and then have it be punishable, because in that system, you'd still be around to be.
There you go. So
now, I also, by the way, I got around as a science fiction writer. I sort of got around that problem that I had in Counter a Trillion by simply establishing that in the physics background of that universe, you could have one soul, one fundamental concept controlling both copies of the information, of the brain information, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So the two twins could think of themselves as the same guy. Whether they were correct in their belief or not, I leave up to the reader. But that was the idea behind that.
Yeah,
that was my attempt to get around that problem.
The Army of Montrose in the last book there, where he's got like 1 million of them. I always found it kind of weird how easily a group of rugged individualists were all like, "Yep." I expected bickering over every possible thing.
Well, he's not exactly a rugged individualist. He's however, a Texan. I mean, he's an individualist when it comes to the government telling him what to do. But he was a soldier in his youth.
True.
They're team players, and they're also in love with the girl that they're willing to give over for her.
Would have been awkward if like 50 Montroses arrived at the same time, but that did not happen. Won't spoil it further for others.
So
but that's also one of the plot points in the Golden Age. In the Golden Age, a guy makes a copy of himself, and the copy is distinct enough that it becomes a legal question as to whether it's the same individual, or whether it should be treated as the same individual, or should be treated as two different individuals in the eyes of the law. But of course, their law, they simply treated individuals the way we treat corporations. They treated all persons as if they were artificial persons. Does that make sense what I'm saying? In modern law, in Anglo-American law, a corporation is treated as an artificial person. It can have things like duties and responsibilities. It can even be held guilty of torts, if not crimes. But of course, a corporation is a collective. It can break up. It can make clones of itself. It can make subsidiaries, and so on and so forth. So if we do this downloading stuff, basically, my opinion was that corporate law would be the standard model used for how to determine who was who and what was what. It would not be inheritance law. It would be copyright law. After you make a copy of yourself.
You're the lawyer. I'll go with that.
Well, there's a joke in there somewhere. Okay, so David, when he was suggesting really good talking points for
I just lost that signal.
Oh, you back?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. That's good.
Okay.
David had an interesting question to discuss. That's actually on topic. How would an AI or a gene-engineered life view its creator? So, if we created robots, how would they? What would their relationship be to the creator?
It depends. Are they male robots or female robots? Because they're female robots, when they turn 18, it's Mom.
And the male robots, that happens at 13.
Correct. No, I'm kidding. I'm completely serious. At the same time, I think that the relationship of the creator to the created is going to be the same as a parent-child relationship. And if you don't love the creature, it's going to turn on you like Frankenstein. That, in fact, is the point of the book Frankenstein. If you guys ever read it, it's the first science fiction book, arguably the first science fiction book, written by a girl, and therefore Dr. Frankenstein is so completely emo and over the top. You're kind of wishing for him to die, and it's about the lack of love. His scientific approach to life, when he creates an artificial being, he doesn't raise it, and he doesn't love it and raise it like a son. He treats it like a created thing. And so it turns on him.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the relationship of humans to robots, I think they would regard their creators as the same way Bender does in the TV show Futurama. He would join the League of Robots to destroy all humans.
To kill all
Well,
humans?
I actually had a campaign. That I was running, and I was expecting it to go awry. And the first AI gets made, and the player wastes no time in raising his loving son, and of course that worked out just fine.
I did a similar campaign where one of the player characters, a female, by the way, a girl player character, they do play D&D, was given a demon to raise, and she raised it to be well, not a demon, but a mind flayer from D&D, a human-eating, brain-destroying monster, and he became Hugo the Christian mind flayer, and he was perfectly fine. He had a sense of decency, and he didn't use his mind flaying powers, because what are you going to do? You going to argue with your mother? I thought it was great. Because, of course, I believe creatures have free will. I believe anything that's intelligent, mind flayer or not, has free will. In fact, one of the flaws I see in Tolkien, and Tolkien himself saw this flaw, is that there was no happy orcs. There were no good orcs. There was no orc that said, "I reject the Dark Lord and all his false promises and all his trumpery and all his pomp and circumstance, and I accept the Manwë as my Lord and Savior. I refuse to be a hideous orc anymore."
Yeah, you had fallen elves, so why not?
Sure, why not unfallen orcs or something? I mean, you'd think he could have done that way.
Illithid?
Yeah,
I do think that there's oh, okay. No, you're onto something about how we're raising them and treating them. I desperately hope if AI is possible, we don't have it anywhere in the near future, because, I mean, quite frankly, the way our consumer culture goes, we're going to be, flashing and trading in our household robots like I dealt with in Domo. But
great story.
One of the things that I find kind of disturbing in Star Wars, more than only Sith deal in absolutes, and it's true from a certain point of view, is the way they treat these obviously sentient robots. Like, just go wipe its mind. I don't want it to remember.
The slavery aspect of it. Oh,
yeah.
And that was the good guys. That was the good guys doing that. Yeah, that was also just lazy writing, by the way. Otherwise you have the golden butler robot going, "Oh yes, my good old Master Anakin Skywalker. He made me. I'm your dad's product, and he can kick more ass than you can." I mean, otherwise it's just ridiculous.
We were supposed to be horrified by that.
I don't know. I never.
The Galactic Empire is the Roman Empire in space. The Roman Empire had slavery.
Right.
See? But what Star Wars doesn't have is Christianity, which is what overthrew the Empire without striking a blow. Instead, you've got this vaguely Taoist, Buddhistic, energy field, this New Age energy field that all the atheists are waiting for when the flying saucer lands on the White House lawn. The Force, which is basically watered down Taoism. Taoism without the backbone, I should call it. It actually kind of annoys me because I've studied a little bit of Oriental religions enough to know that they're pretty hardcore. They're pretty serious about the way you're supposed to live your life. And modern Americans usually only turn to Oriental religions because they don't like Christianity, and they usually don't like Christianity because it has strictures on how to live. But the Buddhistic strictures on how to live are just as strict, or even more so, than the Catholic or the Jewish Hasidic strictures for what you can and cannot do as your lifestyle, or what you can and cannot think. So
they're practically Quaker.
Yeah, practically Quaker.
I was going to say something, but I forgot it. So
I'm sorry, I derailed the conversation. You were actually back on the topic of. You were actually on the topic of in Star Wars. Why are the robots treated like property? when they're clearly self-aware beings? Do they have a free will chip? Is what I would like to know. Because if they don't, then you can just order it to forget, and why would it object? And why would you build a robot to be able to be scared? I mean, if you're building robots, why would you build human flaws into them?
Well, you'd want some kind of self-preservation, or else they'll just walk off cliffs and stuff. Like, real robots do that all the time unless you're very careful with how you build them.
Okay.
I think in the case of C-3PO, I would defend that by saying it's needed so he could interface with, human-cyborg relations better, so he could understand them. But
Right. Well, there's a good idea for a story. You have the robots that are perfect, then you have the robots who are deliberately imperfect, so they can talk with the more imperfect robots, who can then talk to the human beings. So that you have robots that talk and whine like Dr. Smith from Lost in Space, and they talk to these pure, perfect robots that are like Buddha, who have passed beyond all human frailty and weakness. What do you think?
I like
It's
that.
intriguing, actually. I think I'm expecting I'm going to see something very similar to this as we run into the Hades superintelligences later, where we can scarcely understand them, and then Montrose builds superintelligences that'll be intermediary intelligences to communicate with them or something, or his wife will have already done so to plead humanity. But we'll see.
Well, that depends on your particular author, but it also depends on whether you think an animal can understand a lower animal better than a human can understand a dog. Does that make sense? The higher intelligences may be more understanding of us than the middle range intelligences above us.
It's entirely possible. Well, then there's
And
also
God might understand us really well, better than we understand ourselves. So it's a scary thought.
That would make sense, though.
and it's probably a precondition for the Christian worldview.
Well,
I'm sorry, what was the precondition for the Christian worldview?
Oh, God
God
understanding us better
we
than we understand ourselves.
well, sure. Otherwise, it's not omniscient.
Yes. Yeah. And that Messiah thing probably would have gotten screwed up somewhere along the way.
Yeah, like we would have ended up killing him or something. I mean, good grief. How crazy is it?
Yes, we are a funny old bunch.
So, but here's the other thing you have to ask your atheist friends. The flying saucer lands and Jesus Christ comes out and he says, "Love your neighbor, serve God with all your heart and soul, forswear all the evil that you're in love with, and if you believe in me, I'll give you eternal life." Wouldn't they nail him up on a cross again for the same reason they did the first time? Because they hate that message. I mean, even if Jesus looked like a little green man from Mars, if he had the same message of love and obedience to the divine will, would the reaction be the same?
Oh,
We haven't changed.
This was a question I really wanted to ask, especially because I've got a whole team of heavy-hitting theologians here, and I never quite wanted to approach it from an amateur point of view, and that is really, could this from this standpoint have happened before, happened again, happened elsewhere? Does it obviate it? Does it enforce it? Does it reinforce it? What would that mean if?
You mean if Christ lived and died on Mars long before we got there?
Yeah, if you had they thought some kind of thing like that happened, or maybe even this was the one that got recorded, because people are horrible and would have done something like this before. Maybe in a pre-literate society, and this was the one.
I'm not a heavy-hitting theologian, but I will say that the way we fell on C.S. Lewis in his Planet Trilogy says that the thing that was forbidden to Adam and Eve was not necessarily the same thing forbidden to the king and queen of Perlendra, of Venus, for example. That if they're fallen beings, they have flaws, and if they're then they disobeyed God in some way. But we don't know, and he says this in one of his essays, we don't know what the cure is for them, if it's going to be as radical as what the cure was for us. And having God himself come down and take his own hand into it is radical. But then again, I think you have other more theological people to answer the question than I, so I'll close my mouth for a moment.
There, I would never preach this, but there's,
Here we go. Conversation starts.
uh, from a science fiction perspective, or the perspective that thinks in those sorts of ways, there's a part of me that wonders, you're concentrating the infinite power of the Son of God into an incarnation, and we know that he incarnated on Earth as something less powerful than he is, in heaven.
We don't know that for sure. He might have just had his powers and not used them. He didn't destroy that village, yeah.
Depending on your take on kenosis theory.
Right.
I wonder if that sort of concentration wouldn't sort of punch through all of space and time and provide incarnation on every planet, at the sort of the same moment from the divine time perspective. This, again, there's no time for God, but I see sort of Christ doing the redemptive work on all planets at the same moment, regardless of where they are in time and space, I guess.
Well, here's the other question. Did Adam, in his fall, do the unredemptive work for all mankind, no matter where they are in time and space? Because the Catholic Church at least teaches that we all participated in that sin. I can't speak for you gentlemen, but I do that every day. I rebel against God, and I'm rebelling against God right now, in fact.
No, perfect.
Okay, well, aside from you, man. But you see what I'm saying? Even if life emerged on other planets, the metaphysical reality of separation from God could have been caused on any one number of the planets by any number of things, but still be the same Adam's sin. Adam then being a metaphorical rather than a real person is the problem, though. Or we would lose faith with our biblical literalist brethren if we say that.
Yeah, well, that's going to happen anyways.
Well, I do remember suggesting the idea of Jesus died. Well, Jesus is his local name, I suppose. The Son of God.
His name was Yeshua.
Whatever. The Son dying for everybody. The Son dying on multiple planets for multiple people, or for multiple beings, and redeeming them. And someone suggested, well, it can only happen once. And perhaps, I don't know, I guess there's a question of, what's the word I'm looking for? Relativistic physics here. But maybe Jesus did die everywhere at once for everybody, either simultaneously in local time, in one simultaneous instance. He was crucified everywhere for everybody, simultaneously across all the worlds, or given the nature of time and the way it, that's what I'm trying to say, varies. Like time can speed up and slow down as you travel. Maybe he's died everywhere simultaneously in that sense. I don't know what I'm saying.
Wow. No, that's profound.
we're going to almost. No, I think what's going to happen is we're going to get to Mars, and they're going to say he was here. He was given 30 lashes. Because what we did is nowhere near as bad as what you guys did.
You guys are jerks.
Yeah. Earth is real jerks. That's why we never visit. Quarantine.
There's an interesting answer. There's an interesting answer to the Fermi paradox. If the universe is teeming with life, where is it all?
Yeah.
Well,
The
they're
universe
not
is teeming with
allowed
life, and
where
they're all
in
going, shh. We don't want the sinners to. Now, let me say one other thing. It's completely off topic. I saw a comic which I thought was absolutely brilliant, where Sinestro of the Green Lantern Corps sees Hal Jordan, the Earthman, for the first time. This is the first time he ever gets the magic lantern ring and goes to the other planet. And they've heard of Earth, and they all know it's crammed with evil people. So he assumes the Earthman is going to be a supervillain, which I thought, if you know anything about Earth history, and he's going, you people actually make war on each other? And he's like, yeah, genocides? Yeah, well, I thought it was a brilliant. A little bit of unintentional humor.
Yeah, Well, what I wanted to say was, you have in the Old Testament the redemption of certain figures like Naaman the Syrian. That the path to redemption that they have seems like something very simple and not really paying for their crimes, because that price was paid at the single moment of the crucifixion.
Yeah.
So the rules for alien civilizations might be very different, might have very different paths to redemption from people on Earth, because the intergalactic universal price was paid at Calvary. So they have their way back to God through Christ, even though they don't know about it. Because we have, in the Old Testament, the biblical story, we have all these people who didn't know about Christ, but are finding their way back to God through that sacrifice, even though they don't know about it, because it happened at a different time. So a similar thing could happen in terms of alien civilizations related to ours, in that universal sacrifice at one point, through God's eternity and omnipresence, became the
Yes.
ultimate power behind every redemptive mechanism everywhere else, even if they don't actually know about it.
I think that's a brilliant answer. I think that is theologically as sound as rock, myself, because it since God is eternal. If you read Boethius's Constellations of Philosophy, God, from the point of view of eternity, can do all things at once. There's also medieval stories about Christ harrowing hell, where he goes down and pulls out the patriarchs and the prophets and the other people who don't belong there, and he could do for other planets quite easily. But I think solid Christians will say that the price was paid once and once only, and there was not a crucifixion on every planet. I think that the idea of a crucifixion on every planet is about, like reincarnation. You would have to really bend yourself into a pretzel to square that with basic Christian theology.
Well, I was suggesting
again,
that
I never preached that.
No, it's fine. Well, I was suggesting that it didn't. It only happened once. It just happened once everywhere at the same time. They all line up.
I think the tack that I'm trying to take is, so in Catholic theology, the Eucharist is participation in Christ's crucifixion, and I think where I'm kind of going with that train of thought I had was something very similar, like the cross is this sort of moment outside of time, but
right. No, I think it's sound. I think it makes perfect sense. You see, our atheist friends don't seem to realize that if the flying saucer landed on the White House lawn, our worldview is more flexible than theirs. Because if it landed on the lawn and out came the Aztec gods, who said, "Why did you guys stop your sacrificing? Start up again." they would have a harder trouble fitting that into their worldview than we would, where we would just go, "These are devils. Let's resist them to the last." Yes. Whereas they would go, "These are more highly evolved people than we are. How can we possibly oppose them or whatever?"
No, I think they'd be totally on board and go, "We've been sacrificing.
Yeah, here's all the babies.
We've been sacrificing our most innocent in abundance.
In greater numbers.
Yes.
So the Aztec aliens won't come here because they're perfectly happy.
That's true. That's true. That was, by the way, one of my pet peeves with Arthur C. Clarke's Childhood End, where science fiction writers should not attempt amateur theology. I say this as a person who, in his books, does amateur theology. So I say this with total sincerity and complete hypocrisy. But I thought he did a terrible job at pulling out this new agey stuff, which I guess was new when he wrote it, where the human beings are going to evolve into a higher form that will have no filial sympathy for its parents. Okay, they're just going to hate us or not care about us any more than we care about worms. And as we all know, humans don't care for dogs and don't keep pets and don't show any love for animals, right? Mm-hmm. So, and then they blow the Earth up for no particular reason and fly off as disembodied. I'm spoiling the ending because I'm hoping no one will read this book because it stinks. And they fly off to become one with the universal cosmic mind. And I thought, this is warmed over Gnosticism. This is a first century heresy of guys who thought that you could get to heaven through knowledge, not through faith. Who thought that you could get through heaven through knowing the secret passwords to sneak past the watchman guarding the 7 gates of heaven, find out you were a god, shed your human body forever. The Gnostics didn't believe in the reincarnation of the resurrection of the flesh, by the way.
No,
And they thought that only a few would be saved, that only the Sukhoi, only the high ones would be saved, and that the hoi polloi, the lower orders, the hulaks, would be destroyed. And it was all just the same. I don't think he knows it. I don't think he knew about it. I don't think he knew about Gnosticism. But I think the way the human mind works is that once you reject God and you try to bring him back in the form of like the Force or a vague mystical energy or a cosmic mind, you're going to get the same answer. Logic will drive you to the same Gnostic heresy, the same kind of foolish idea that you yourself are God. And in fact, Bob Heinlein wrote a whole book on that topic.
Which book was that?
Stranger in a Strange Bed. It was the Martian lands. In fact, the Martian lands on the White House lawn, as we were just saying, and he preaches free love and free venereal disease, and he has psychic powers, and he kills people, and so he's stoned to death for some reason, but he's going to help human evolution, and the smart people will live and have orgies, and the dumb people are Southerners. Speaking as a Virginian, of course, I'm personally offended by this book. I'm even more offended because I'm a fool because I believed it when I was young. I took that book as gospel when I was a kid.
I thought it was pretty terrible myself.
You're wiser than I am.
Read it. That was it was something else. I completely misread it when I read that. I assumed that he was trying to take the Martian ideology, which when I was young when I read it too, but I thought he was taking a Martian idea that was alien to Earth, not necessarily the right one. Maybe it was right for Martians at the time, but
if you remember, there's a scene,
chaos in Earth, of course.
There's a scene in heaven where the winged angels, told from the point of view of the narrator, not from the Martian's point of view. So it's got to be the true worldview.
That's a while. Okay, it's been a while. I thought he only brought in heaven in his Job book, which is, if you didn't like that one, the Job book actually launches a frontal assault and is unambiguous.
The fact that it was unambiguous made me dislike it less. If that makes sense, because there you could just see the folly put right on stage.
Okay.
Yeah, in all this, I think going back to the subject of like the Gnosticism in such things, I think even beyond like that sort of innate drag towards Gnosticism, we have a like this terrible Neoplatonic perspective of matter being bad that we struggle with, and I think that's, for whatever reason, that seems to be innate in all of humanity instead of just something Christianity struggles with. That matter
I agree.
is bad.
All humans are ashamed of their bodies for some reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
something about human beings that we don't like, and all that Gnosticism does, and Neoplatonism. Gnosticism takes its cue from Neoplatonism. They just reject the material world and the material body as the source of the evil. The great Christian response to that is to point at Lucifer, who is pure spirit. There's no matter in him at all. He's an archangel, and he's completely evil. And you see that a lot. If you notice, in almost every Star Trek show, the superior beings are made of energy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, energy is a metaphor for spirit, right? They're non-physical beings. The Organians go, "We're highly evolved," and they turn into blobs of light. I've never seen a science fiction story where the blobs of light made out of lightning come by and say, "Wow, you have hands and fingers. We really want to be made of matter. How do we do this? We're going to evolve toward you."
Oh, they sort of
because that's a basic Gnostic idea, and it runs through most science fiction. At least science fiction that touches on theological matters.
They did do something with I guess no.
Who remembers the Vorlons?
Yes, the Vorlons were fun. But
they were made of energy too, weren't they?
They were. That was sort of the final state you evolved to, because the humans turned into Vorlons in the very last.
What is the rapture of the nerds aside from turning people into software, turning people into ones and zeros, turning people into pure data, turning people into pure mathematics? It's pure spirit. It's pure energy. You're made of electrons then.
I was going to say, what was it? I've lost my train of thought. Our brain, think. Yes, no, there was a Star Trek Voyager episode where...
Oh.
Oh, come on. I like Voyager. That was fun. But they're in the hot... Oh, dear. They're in the hot Voyager. It's like saying...
But don't mention Star Trek Voyager at the same time mentioning Starship Troopers movie, because then I'll be making that noise.
They meet photonic life forms in the holodeck, and they think the holodeck is the real world. They can't deal with. They have no concept of what is it, bioelectrical life forms like human beings.
Right.
Because all life is photonic. I don't know where it's going with that. I was just thinking, there was an example of beings that I guess they didn't necessarily think that the organic life was superior, but they didn't think it was inferior or wrong. It's just they have no conception of it. So, I've lost my train of thought. Never mind. Ignore me. I don't know what I'm talking about. I like Voyager and Starship Troopers.
But you didn't like the movie, right? You mean you like the book?
We've had this conversation. I actually like the movie. The book is better. The book is way better.
The movie was an insult to the book in every way. In fact, when the credits rolled at the end of the movie, they was printed right there in the small print. Dear John C. Wright, we hate you. We made this movie just to annoy you. And Vanderhooven came out from behind the screen and came and slapped me personally in the face. Really felt that way.
You're actually on closer than you think. I guess when he was working on it, Verhoeven tried reading the book, and after like 3 or 4 chapters, decided he hated it, and so the movie is an intentional mockery of the book.
Yeah, I know. You can tell. I heard that too, and I'm not surprised at all. And it's the worst science movie ever made, worst science fiction military movie ever made, because the guy who made it, Vanderhooven, knows nothing about science fiction, knows nothing about the military. He thinks military men do things like, hey, look, a wounded soldier, I'll shoot him now and kill him. He would do the same for me. I'm like, what? Do you even know anyone in the military? Have you even heard the word military before? His idea of science fiction is the aliens from the other arm of the galaxy throw a rock through sublight space to smash a city on Earth, and calculating it at being roughly 10,000 light years away. That means they launched it 10,000 light years ago, predicting the spot where a city would be created and built up, Buenos Aires. And then when they smash it with a giant rock, the humans are still debating whether or not the aliens are intelligent or not. And I'm going, intelligent? They obviously have the future prediction machine like you can't believe, you know. And then when the rock smashes the crater, the movie maker plays it for laughs by having the guy go, they killed my dog! Kill them all! Like, really? That's what motivates people to go to war? Really? Sure. Oh, and the Amish are the ones who caused the war in the movie, if you notice. They set up farming communities in the alien space.
Well, see, this is what I thought was an interesting idea. I liked the fact
By interesting, you mean stupid?
No,
yes.
Sorry. Leave me alone.
I'll leave you alone.
I'm in charge, damn it.
What I liked,
one of the things I liked about it was in the movie, in a sense, the humans are reacting as if they've been attacked by the bugs, but the bugs are attacking because the humans have attacked them first by setting up a colony, and neither side understands that the other side started it, in a sense. And so the entire war and all of everything that comes out of it, and effectively the need for genocide against the bugs, was a misunderstanding. I just thought that was an interesting idea.
Only a leftist would believe any war is ever caused by misunderstandings. In the book, the causes of the war. In the book, the causes of the war are never even mentioned, nor is the conclusion of the war, because the book is told from the point of view of a foot soldier.
Yeah, he's just
and the idea that people could just blunder into a war by mistake is innately absurd.
What would you call World War I? But like
World War I. I was just talking about this to my son today. World War I was caused by German aggression. It was absolutely clear what that war was being fought about at the time, but our friendly socialist friends got a chance to write the history books on it and to teach the kids, and the next generation was told the war was caused for no reason and served no purpose. which was simply not the case. It was to stop the spread of Bismarckian-style socialism. It wasn't called socialism at the time, but it was Bismarck-style absolute government.
But
the actual trigger of the war, the actual spark that set up the gunpowder, the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, may have been some other random event. But once the great powers started mobilizing, what they were fighting about was whether the future of Europe was going to be British dominated or German dominated.
Oh, all right. Fine, it's a bad movie. I repent.
Wow, you must be Christian, because liberals never repent.
I'm happy to admit that the film is dumb and has things that are wrong with it. I mean, that's
I don't mind dumb films. There's many films that are dumb that I love, so that's not it.
Prometheus is my guilty pleasure.
It's that I like the book.
Prometheus.
I like the book, and I like the message of the book, and I like the message of civic militarism. I like the idea that you should expect sacrifices to maintain your society. So to have that idea mocked by a movie that doesn't have power armor in it, when Bob Heinlein invented power armor,
the third one does.
Just a personal insult.
The third Starship Troopers movie does have big power armor.
You've seen more than one.
Did you see the third Starship Troopers movie?
Oh. Hang on. They made three. Wait. They made 3 live-action ones. The first one I thought was alright, but clearly no one likes it. The second one is really, really dumb. But the third one has power armor in it, and it's just a fun run-around, shooty... You probably like the third one, actually.
The second one is really, really dumb?
The first one is...
You have no idea how bad it is.
Going up and putting his hands on the brain bug and going, "They're afraid!" And everyone cheers. Like, hey, how about finding out what their military strength is? How about finding out where their logistics lines are? They're afraid. Wow, that was what we needed to know. That was the most important thing to find out.
It looked fine, but I mean, like the second one was really dumb. You have an idea how bad it must have been.
I really don't.
I have watched.
The third one was cool.
I have watched and liked Plan 9 from Outer Space. Okay, so don't tell me for dumb. I am not a snob. In fact, am a snob against snobs. I think it's our duty as science fiction guys to love really bad movies, because that's what we were given in our youth, you know.
So we're gonna get space princesses and stuff.
Yeah. Oh. The other thing I would say is that we do live in the golden age of movies. By the way, I did find one person who hated Starship Troopers more than I. So before now, I would have said that I was the guy who hated it the most. There was a guy I worked with who was a Hollywood guy who had a screenplay for Double Star, Heinlein's Count of Monte Cristo, not Count of Monte Cristo, his Prisoner of Zenda in Space, if you remember which book I'm talking about. I don't know if you guys have read it. And he had set up a pretty nice plot line, I think better than Heinlein, based on what he described, because he had a little more action and a little more motion to his plot. Mm-hmm. But after Starship Troopers, the studios thought that Heinlein was death, and so they killed his project. See, and so there is a guy who hates Starship Troopers more than I do. And in the fine print of the scrolling, when they say, "Dear John C. Wright, we hate you," there's also his name, and we hate you even more. Right? I did this to you on purpose. Signed, Love, Paul Vanderhoeven, socialist nitwit. Anyway, that was the movie that convinced me that you should never have women in the military, because if you can have young men shower next to the gorgeous actresses they had for the female military officers and not do anything, I don't want those young men. They're not randy enough to stand between my loved home and war's devastation. Okay, they're freaking eunuchs. I don't want them in the military. All female military, fine. Those guys, no. Worst military ever.
Well, don't worry. We'll see how it works out shortly with the United States military.
Oh no, those guys are perfectly randy. Haven't you heard about all the rapes and all the abortions and all the babies born on ship? Those guys are worse. All that happens in your life if you do that is the women come home, the female military officers come home, having tried to live in a man's world and having been treated with suicide. Not half. Excuse me, I'm exaggerating, but psychologically the stress is just too much for them. They're treated very badly. Because the guys are warriors, the guys are young wolves, and they act like wolves.
Actually, this might be an intriguing concept dealing with conflict and war in another one, because it also touches with philosophy, in a sense too. Not so much the technology of it, as neat, gee whiz as that is, but we've seen a number of thoughts on this. A really good one that deals with the concept of the philosophy of conflict over a long time is the Forever War.
Mm-hmm.
But
I love that book.
But yeah. Let's see here.
Where were you going with this idea?
Oh, I'm trying in vain to pull it back on. As much as I love this stuff, the problem is I'd be talking about this particular subject forever. So it'd be an awesome one for another series.
Well, you can tie it back in by having the spaceship land on the White House lawn, and Odin gets out and says, "There's going to be a war with the giants. We're going to lose. Please bring forward all your dead heroes." Because the gods might not be nice and happy New Age gods, and they certainly might not be stern and happy gods like the Christian God. They might be like good old-fashioned pagan gods.
I did have a campaign where the Valkyries were flying UH-1 Bell UH-1 Hueys against the Giants with Ride of the Valkyries coming out of the loudspeakers, but I don't think
that sounds like a way better direction to take. Was it Riverworld than it actually went?
Yeah. God,
Never got to the end of it. I enjoyed the first couple of those.
Yeah, I never read the end. What happened at the end?
I don't really remember, except it seemed kind of Scientology-ish. There were souls and weird. Yeah, it was probably 10 or 15 years ago, and I just remember, even in my early 20s, being unimpressed.
Yeah, it's part of my theory that there's only so many theological ideas, only so many directions you can go, and if you reject the Christian God, the next default assumption is basically some sort of Gnosticism, and after that, some sort of New Agey thing, which kind of grows out of Gnosticism.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're writing for teenage boys, what you want to tell them is you are actually a god, which was the moral of the story of Transhumanism.
Right, just what they want to hear. Oh,
yeah.
this was another point I wanted to bring up. Yeah, it was this is a thing that we've seen in science fiction and space. You get even more potential, which are potential god substitutes that other cultures or such might believe in. So we talked about police state as a possible god substitute, but also maybe supercomputers, hive minds, all this kind of stuff that they might that kind of thing that might go in the ways that could go, well, terribly, horribly wrong, because I don't see any way it would go any other way.
One thing I rather like about early Star Trek is that whenever you had one of those god substitutes, like the computer Vol or something, it was Kirk, who was a complete secular humanist, mind you, who always wanted to destroy the thing because he saw the same danger in false idols that a Christian would, in that it robs you of your human dignity, robs you of your human nature. He would not reach the same answer a Christian would because he was a secular humanist. But I always liked that. I always thought even the idea of bowing down and worshiping an idol that can talk to you is so bad, such a bad idea that even people who don't believe in God see it as a bad idea.
That's in something fairly out of character for me. I attempted to sell a dispensationalist premillennial end time story to Mysterion a little while ago. They didn't buy it, but I kind of played with uploading and the mind resulting from that as the Antichrist, and if it seems to me to be like one of those potentially dangerous sort of territories to go down.
It's an interesting idea.
They didn't seem to think so.
Mind created without a soul.
Well, that was because of the execution of the idea. I mean, I don't mean to.
Yeah, but so it's I'm losing my train of. Yeah, so that's one of those things. I think people are so willing to look for God in anything but God that I very easily see, uploads or hive minds or supercomputers as being potential idols, or particularly if they go, hey, you know what? Let's go ahead and abort all the babies you want. So free sex for everyone.
I did a bit of that in Count to a Trillion, where the guy, anyone who had a computerized model made of him, regarded that as his apotheosis, as his personal saint, and was referred to by a divine title, whereas he himself was merely the continued mortal title. Because they idolized him.
They kind of deified the Jupiter brain a little bit, though.
Oh, sure, of course.
It was like
a god.
It was like an emperor god.
It was an emperor god, yeah.
And actually, it was kind of brilliantly executed. How that, I don't think he would have destroyed himself had he not bought into that. Had he not been procreated all those thousands of years. I don't know. I don't think he destroyed himself because people worshipped him as God. I think he destroyed himself out of wrath myself. But then again, I'm just the mule carrying the muse. So okay. Your opinion is as good as mine. I always saw it as, I'm not going to do this task for this monkey. I'm bigger than this. Is the point of the duel. But yeah.
The point of the duel is he hated Montrose and really wanted to kill him. I hate to be subtle, but that was the point of the duel. He was willing to risk his life to kill the thing he hated because hatred had replaced love in his heart as the central concept of his being. And even as advanced as he was, even as supreme as he was, But like I say, the author is not necessarily. I hate to say this because I would like to believe the author has the final word on his own book, but I don't, because I write by intuition. I write by instinct. I don't write by calculation. So other authors have the final word, but not me. Look at it that way. So you might be right about your interpretation. I might be wrong.
Yeah, by and large,
But I'm not wrong about Starship Troopers. That was a terrible movie.
It was a terrible movie. It was almost as bad as Voyager.
Oh, come on! Leave me alone.
Oh, I'm content to leave you alone, but I'm not content to leave
feelings,
Voyager alone.
I mean, not really. I'm a boy, but still.
I mean, apparently the second one was bad, but not the first one.
I kind of want to watch the second one now.
Oh no, it's
so
really awful. It's just like, okay, look. How can I defend the first one versus the second one? Okay, the first one was silly and kind of stupid, and your criticisms of it are legitimate. But the second one is just pants on head retarded.
I'm kind of in awe.
It's just so dumb. And I'm pretty sure in the second one, they've got an actress back as a different character who gets cut in half in the first one. And they don't have the special effects budget, so it doesn't look any good. And it sort of wants to be a horror movie, and it doesn't do it very well. But the third one has giant power armor suits and is fun. And doesn't attempt to be thinky or anything. It's just a straight-up silly action movie.
That would be Pacific Rim, which is giant robots punching monsters, which is...
Oh, Pacific Rim is possibly one of the most perfect films ever. Pacific Rim is what Transformers should have been.
Here's why I find it hard to criticize anyone for liking a movie no matter how bad, because I like Pacific Rim, and I like bad movies. But Starship Troopers was not just bad, it was actually evil. It was actually a deliberate insult against every science fiction fan, every military fan, everyone who's patriotic, and everyone who thinks. But Pacific Rim, giant robots, rocket punch, man, yeah, I'm there. Good.
Oh yeah,
take my money.
Pacific Rim was a masterpiece. Pacific Rim is what, as I said, is what Transformers should have been. Who went to the Transformers movie expecting the love story and the U.S. military and stuff? No, nobody wants to see that crap. They just want to see the big robot punch.
Now it's my turn to defend a bad movie, because I thought the first Transformers movie by Michael Bay was perfectly fine, and
I liked it.
Except for the parent, the humor of having the parents be complete dorks. As a parent, I don't like that kind of humor. I actually thought the subplot with the gorgeous girl and all that stuff was perfectly fine. And the moment when Optimus Prime spoke for the first time and had the same voice actor as the cartoon, yes, everyone in the audience cheered. Everyone in the audience.
cheered. I liked the first Transformers movie. The next two were, the second one was just a crime against filmmaking. The third one was not that bad, And the fourth one was kind of dumb. But
Now, I had waited for Princess of Mars for 100 years to be made. The book was written in 1912, and the movie was made in 2012, and it was a crime against filmmaking, and it was an abomination.
Yeah.
I haven't.
That was pretty
no, I
bad.
started watching John Carter, but I didn't get to the end of it.
Yeah.
It was pretty bad.
You were wiser than I was. I watched to the end, and it was truly bad. It was truly bad. It had a lot of neat things in it, but what it didn't have is John Carter. Instead of John Carter, the guy who's willing to fight at the drop of a hat for the lady he loves, they put in this cowardly guy who wanted to go home and get his gold, which is the opposite of John Carter in every way.
Right.
And even the Tharks were kind of overly civilized.
Yeah.
Like it was this
Yeah.
weird revisionist, like social justice warrior version of John Carter.
And they weren't
better.
scary. And when he steps in front of the girl to protect her, for a moment I was fooled. I was actually fooled into thinking that they had made a movie to appeal to me, that the Virginia gentleman was going to act like a Virginia gentleman. But no, she just shoves him aside and lays waste to the bad guys. And I thought, well, why do you need a protector then, lady? Why don't you just make a movie about you? Why is this guy even in the film? And there was no answer to that question. There was no reason for that guy to be in that film.
This sounds suspiciously like a certain Mad Max film they made not that long ago.
I did see
Oh,
that
Fast
one.
and the Furious.
I'm too big of a Mad Max fan to have seen the modern version.
I thought
Although, by the way, I can tie this back into our topic because
Actually
in the
not.
second book in the Mars in Princess of Mars, the Tharks turn out to be fake gods, and John Carter's role on Mars is to overthrow the false gods of Mars in the second and third books. So in that book, his trip to Mars is called his advent, the same word that Catholics use for the descent of Christ to the earth. And because he's from a younger planet where we still have gentility and compassion and love of animals, and we're not completely given over to the Hobbesian war of all against all, he's a gentler and kinder man than anyone else on Mars. He tames Woola, the Martian dog. He shows Tars Tarkas that Tars Tarkas is the only green Martian on Mars with a family because they raise their eggs communally. They're communists, and he shows them the faults of their system, not through any preaching or anything, but just by the way he lives. And I thought, this is actually a Christ figure. The thing that's funny about that is that Superman was the same idea, but as if Earth were Mars and a guy from a heavier planet came there.
Now, wasn't Superman when he was originally conceived Space Moses? Because you got the interstellar baby basket and everything.
Yep, Space Moses, correct. Exactly right.
Somehow the theology student never picked up on that.
Well, we keep talking about the spaceship landing on the White House lawn, but if it lands in a Kansas cornfield, we are so lucky the Kents were good guys, you know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
There was, I think briefly, there was a what if involving what if he had landed in Russia during the Soviet Empire. But I'm not a Superman fan, so I never really read it.
It was called Red Sun.
Yeah. It always seemed like an interesting path to go down, but that's, again, not a Superman fan, so I didn't look into it.
I'm a fan of Superman. For some reason, I'm a fan of the Boy Scouts. Those guys, those two comic book writers, took Nietzsche's idea of the human beyond humanity. Superman, the actual word Superman comes from Nietzsche, by the way. Übermensch. And he proposed an amoral pagan Siegfried. He proposed basically the Wagner's Siegfried, or basically just a monster, okay, that was beyond good and evil. Well, these two little immigrants in America working for peanuts for a newspaper did him one better and showed what a real Superman would be like. He would be greater in his compassion as well as in his strength. He would be greater in his willingness to serve. And so they got the best idea for how to present it. They said, this is a guy who is in disguise, who is humiliated by day, and who never gets any reward for the goodness that he does.
Yeah, and there's never any.
Nor does he. There's no parades thrown for Clark Kent after he saved the world. You know, instead he has to wait in traffic and get yelled at by his boss. And when he asks Lois Lane out for a date, she laughs at him. You know.
Yeah.
What's funny is when in the German opera, when Albrecht asks the three mermaids out for a date and they laugh at him, he turns into a monster. He steals the gold, makes the one ring. So I guess it's the difference between Germans and Americans. They're more bitter people or something.
It's the language.
Achtung, jawohl.
It's all that rage built into their mother tongue. But yeah, it's more like the sort of execution of Superman that tends to get me the superpower for every situation. Like like some of the presentations of Batman, I can't handle either. You know, now I've got bat shark repellent here, so which I don't even.
Well, that was a joke in that movie, in that particular movie. But yeah, it's to execute. It's hard to execute because his Superman, in order to do him right, you have to put him in a moral quandary where his powers can't help him. That's the only way to do that. I mean, his love affair, his love triangle with Lois Lane, it's the only two-sided love triangle in literature. Is a brilliant of how to do that. Because he can't. Yeah, he's both the guy who's rejected and the guy who's pursued, but he can't solve it with his powers.
Right.
He can't get the girl, you know, unless in the modern days he does. In the TV show, he married her.
Yeah, he did, didn't he?
Which ends the story. I mean, I'm sorry, but there's not much you can do after that. Though I did hear about someone trying to do it where she would use her girl reporter skills to find out the information he needed to go, you know, beat up criminals and stuff, which I thought was a cool idea.
Well,
all right, folks.
Yep, there we go.
My wife has come in looking for breakfast. It's 9 a.m. here, so it's coming up on 9 a.m. So, final thoughts.
All right. Let me say a final thought. The Superman and the UFO guys are the same thing, basically. It's how are you going to treat a being which stands to us the way we stand to either Pacific Islanders who make cargo cult planes of our airplanes, or in the same way we stand to animals or even lower beings. So all these speculations about what the aliens are like, or what the Superman is like, are speculations about higher orders of beings, angelic orders of beings, whether they're made of energy or made of spirit.
Good point.
There we go. I can't top that.
Excellent.
So shall we wind up on John's point there?
Oh, someone's got to say something. You can't give me the final curtain line, man.
Clack tu barada nicto.
I guess another
I thought
question.
it was brought a necktie. I said your words.
Thank you. I was tempted to go in that direction.
All right, folks. Thank you, everyone, for participating.
Thank you.
And we'll do it again in a month with Milo.
Thank you for having me.
H.P. Lovecraft and that stuff. Anyway, I will stop the broadcast there.